Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're meeting virtually today and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Narasimhan Ravi, and I'm honoured to be the moderator for this webinar. I'm currently in my final year, 2 weeks from graduation, to be honest, and I'm studying a double bachelor's degree in exercise science and business, majoring in sports management at Griffith University on the sunny Gold Coast in Queensland. I'm an international student from the southern part of India called Chennai, and I moved to Australia in the year 2017. On behalf of the whole team at AISECS, I welcome you all to today's webinar titled Envisioning Career Pathways and Support Services out of COVID-19 for International Students. So who are we? What does AISECS stand for? Established in 2018, Australian Indian Sports, Educational and Cultural Society, AISECS, aims to promote and foster the bilateral ties between Australia and India by organising sports, educational and cultural programs for Indian diaspora and Australian businesses, ensuring socio-economic and cultural growth by maintaining a close relationship with the government of the countries, diplomatic corporations and major stakeholders. The opportunities for Australian and Indian businesses are growing quickly. These agencies enable us in shaping Australia's sporting, educational and cultural ties with India. The aim of this webinar is to provide international students like myself insights on potential opportunities, study pathways, careers and support services available to them post-COVID-19. This pandemic has taken a huge toll on all our lives in many different ways and has left us with a lot of uncertainties. During these unprecedented times, a vast majority of international students have undergone financial hardship, mental health issues, and learning difficulties, which has led to a poor quality of life overall. Apart from those stranded here, potential international students are quite clueless with the international border closures which have forced them to reconsider their study abroad decisions and compromise on their Australian dreams. Graduating students are unsure of the best career pathways in the new normal. And all of this has led to increased anxiety. To address this issue, we have 4 amazing guest speakers in the panel with us today who will present their thoughts and share their expertise in this hour of need. Now, let me introduce you to all our panelists. Firstly, we have Mr. Manish Gupta, the Consul General of India, Sydney. Thank you, Mr. Manish, for making time to attend our webinar despite your busy schedule. I'm sure we have a lot of Indian international students eagerly waiting to hear what you say. We also have with us Mr. Craig Foster, a former Socceroo broadcaster, adjunct professor for sport and social responsibility, a human rights advocate, and the founder of PlayForLives. Thank you so much, Mr. Craig, for joining us today. I'm sure there are a lot of sports enthusiasts like myself watching this webinar, and we can't wait to hear from you.
Thanks, Ravi. It's a pleasure.
Next up, we have Mr. Peter Mackey, the Director of Trade, International Education and Small Business Operations at Study New South Wales. Welcome, Mr. Peter. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Thanks, Ravi.
And last but not the least, we have Mr. Gurnam Singh, the founder of AISECS. Thank you so much, Mr. Gurnam, for putting together this amazing initiative.
Thanks, Ravi.
All right, without much ado, let me welcome our first speaker for today, Mr. Manish Gupta. So you've been a great pillar of support for Indian international students here in Australia during these unprecedented times, especially with the Vande Bharat mission providing repatriation flights. And would you be able to further explain your role and the support services available to Indian international students?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure and it's a delight to join you all. And I'm indeed delighted, Ravi, you as an international student is moderating this webinar. The students are always close to our heart. And when it comes to international students, I always believe home away from home, once you are in a different country, it's important that you get the right support and counseling as and when it is needed. Indeed, a great privilege for me to have a renowned sports personality, Craig Foster. He's also a soccer player, soccer analyst. He is joining us. And dear friend Peter Mackey from Study NSW, who is here. I think we have the right sort of people who can address some of the concerns. I know these are difficult times. We won't be able to provide you 100% solutions, but certainly you will benefit what the governments are doing as a whole to support the international students here in Australia. You have rightly said, these are times of great uncertainty. We are nearly 8 months into this pandemic, and the fog, the mist of this pandemic continues to surround us. But what I would certainly say, the humanity as a whole is now able to navigate its way through this pandemic. The tool sets that we have, the medical treatments that we have, probably we are much better equipped today than, let's say, 6 months before. Certainly, when there was onset of the pandemic, it affected different sections of the societies in the variety of ways. When it comes to international students, I distinctly remember initially there was a lot of clamor, you have the uncertainties. A lot of international students, Indian international students, were very keen to go back to India as quickly as possible. Took us 5 to 6 weeks. We worked closely with all the community organizations. AISECS is one of them, because this is AISECS role becomes important because founder Gurnam also came here as a student. Having someone who came here as a student, perhaps he is best equipped to understand the issues and concerns of the international students. But within 6 to 8 weeks, I could see signs of stabilization. We have adjusted to a new normal now. I know it's not a perfect solution to address and all your concerns that you have, but certainly when it comes to your teaching, I think most of the universities are now moved to some degree of face-to-face learning. Moving beyond online, the good thing is, you are able also to socialize because that's really important in a pandemic. Because whenever you have a pandemic, pessimism is but natural. But what is more important is, for all of us to face it with a degree of objectivity, with a degree of rational thinking, and an objective way of managing through the pandemic. It's important that pessimism should not dominate your thoughts or color your rational thinking. And that's what now I see that the concerns now that come to me in the consulate, I know they are very, very few. And most of them, I'm happy you have preferred to stay over here because some of your friends who went back to India, they continue to approach the consulate because they are still stuck over there. But I'm happy to share with you, as far as going back to India is concerned, it's not an issue at all. For any of the international students or those on temporary visa holders or the OCI card holders, and probably getting you back in those who are studying in India, I think Australian government is also thinking on certain lines. As far as government of India is concerned, we have already proposed to the Australian government an air bubbles agreement. In case it comes through, probably you have a lot more flights coming from India to Australia also. Right now, because there are certain capacity constants, some of you would know. Because of that, we have a huge backlog within India, but certainly in the next coming months, the governments will be able to address that. Now, the initial period, I could fully understand the concerns that came to us here in the consulate from the students. But over a period of time, as I am repeatedly saying, what we have seen, a degree of, for us also as organizations, as governments, to look into your issues in a much more concerted manner. Study NSW, has come up with its own package to support the international students over here. Initial phase, we galvanize the community as a whole to assist, in some of your accommodation and other needs. And now the data part, perhaps which is the most important for you all is, looking into your career pathways. Because this is an important thing, but always think, an adversity also springs up new opportunities. Adversity is not about all gloom and doom. But once we adjust to this new normal in the post-COVID environment, you will see new job roles. You will see new skills, new professions. So my advice is just keep you better skilled, better equipped. Learn new skills that is going to help you. It's a beautiful country. You will find your way out through this mist. There's nothing to worry about. I applaud AISECS. I applaud those who have also joined us today, because you are the ones who will spread this message forward. The consulate, once again, let me reiterate, it's a home away from home for you. We'll try to help you out as much as it is possible for everyone. I'm sure all of you will benefit from this webinar. You will be better informed. And in case you have any doubts, uncertainties, feel free to express, and we'll see how best we can address them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manish Gupta, for making us feel home and to giving us hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you so much. Our next speaker is Mr. Craig Foster. We all know that sports brings communities together, but during this pandemic, the sport industry has been hit very hard, with events being postponed or cancelled, as well as reduced funding, which has forced many organizations to step down their employees. Mr. Craig, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about your PlayForLives campaign, your partnerships with AISECS, how to stay safe and train under the new COVID-19 regulations, and your thoughts on the future of the Australian sporting industry?
Yes, thanks, Ravi. And I'll just add my consideration for our Indigenous peoples, and the land on which I am here, which is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. So thank you very much for the invitation, particularly from Gurnam, and from it's lovely to see and to hear from Consul General Gupta, and I welcome everyone else. So I'm delighted to be invited to be here. I guess there's a number of things to talk about. Firstly, is the concept of sport and social responsibility. As you rightly pointed out, I'm an adjunct professor at Torrens University in this field. It's very close to my heart because, and I'm sure many of us share a passion for sport, perhaps not the same sport, but if we spend enough time on this call, I might be able to convert you anyway over to the beautiful game. And the industry of sport, of course, touches on so many aspects of society and has a really profound ability to help all types of people, both within a particular country, so internally and externally, globally. Cooperation, intercultural and interfaith collaboration is so very, very important. And whether it comes to, the Indian community or any other in Australia, all of whom should be equally as important to us and valued, then what it means is it's often through sport, particularly in a country like Australia, where we come to meet each other, meet different cultures, collaborate in a safe space, if you like. So we can break down barriers between religions, between cultures, between ethnicities, between genders, between races, all of these things. Sport offers the opportunity to do that. More than that, though, I believe that it has a broader social responsibility, and sport as an industry tends to like to stay out of many social issues of whether it's justice or areas where it characterises these things as political, if you like. Often they're just politicised. Human rights is one really great example. So when the COVID-19 hit, my response was, it was clear that sport was going to be closed down, at least for a period of time. And so my question was, well, what is our responsibility as a sporting industry to help Australia and, in fact, to help elsewhere in the world? Like, what can we do now, rather than just focused inwardly, as Mr. Gupta was saying before? We have high-profile sporting institutions and organisations and athletes and former athletes and people with profile. And at a time of real uncertainty, and if you like to use the same word, pessimism of Mr. Gupta, it was an opportunity for sports people to step forward and start to try and reshape that narrative a little bit. And so we started to say things along the lines of, look, sport is about challenge, sport is about community, sport is about togetherness. And all of these things are going to be critical during the current pandemic and, issues that the world is perhaps increasingly having to face in future. So we created a campaign, it was called PlayForLives, Not Points, and that meant that we weren't going to be, I'm clearly too old to be playing professionally these days, but I play in the over 35s here in Sydney, and even our team then was going to have several months of not training and not playing. Well, that was 6 or 7 hours per week that we committed to our community sport. And so I said to the club there, some of my teammates who are really high-profile Australians, and said to them, listen, why don't we, instead of putting that, just letting that commitment go to waste, if you like, and why don't we take our commitment to sport and give it to society? Isn't that the responsibility that we have? For those of us who are capable of doing, let's use that 7 hours a week and let's go and help pack hampers for vulnerable people and for refugees and for homeless and for minority communities and for aged people who couldn't leave their homes. So that's what we did. And we ended up creating a campaign where thousands of people from sport all around the country stepped forward and did a whole range of things. And that might have been physically volunteering like us, or in other aspects, it was digital support, creating videos for sick and isolated children and all these types of things. So that was very important. Today, I'm working with the Department of Health in the federal government of Australia to connect and engage with different ethnicities and different communities, called communities, culturally and linguistically diverse, all around the country, particularly through sport, to ensure that everyone has the right information, that everyone has access to, COVID safety guidelines, which of course are constantly changing, in language, and to make sure that every community in Australia feels valued and rightly, part of Australia. So, that's why I'm delighted to be here today. And we've reached out to Gurnam and some other organisations across a range of cultural backgrounds in Australia to say, through your sporting environment and systems and institutions in Australia, whether it's student or otherwise, let's work together to make sure that, moving forward, everyone has all the information they need. Finally, I might just say, and I know there's a few questions, so we might touch on this a little bit later, but sport is changing like every other part of society, and it's having to adapt to a new reality. And that brings opportunities, not only risks. And yes, the financial reality of current professional and community sport in Australia is facing really an historic challenge. But people adapt extremely quickly and are finding new ways to interact with their supporters, new ways to interact with their professional athletes, and new ways to ensure, that commercial value is being provided for sponsors and others. So for those of you who are students, and perhaps I might see you at Torrens sometime and we can sit on a Zoom and talk about these things, students are having to adapt through their courses to develop new skills for a new era. So for example, I'll give you a couple of examples. The nature of a digitisation of sport, which was already very significant, is accelerated apace now. And so students in future will need to have a very clear understanding. Sport, if it was a certain percentage that had been, if you like, digitised, now that has expanded exponentially. So we see high-profile competitions, professional sporting competitions in football and otherwise around the world without fans or with very few fans. And so there's a whole new industry that's emerged very cleverly in that context to be able to provide the crowd sounds at the precise moment, which would happen in a live venue. And so there's algorithms and artificial intelligence and all these things. So, the brilliant IT minds, of course, is a field in which India is internationally renowned, are now applying even more heavily into sport than before. That's one example. Another one is the commercial value for sponsors and commercial partners from professional level to grassroots. What we're seeing is a lot of innovation now in relation to commercial partners and sponsors of sport, whether semi-professional or professional, having to be provided new types of commercial value to justify their investment in sport. And so much of this is also digitised. So even grassroots community sports are finding new ways to engage with their participants on a much more, if you like, sophisticated but certainly regular basis. Because no longer can a commercial partner be guaranteed that we can have signs on a ground, for example, and that's going to provide value for us. So again, the digitisation of that is very important. Esports, of course, has been a very quickly growing field in recent times. Expect that to accelerate. All of these for students are key areas where I would counsel are not only opportunities to learn more now, but are the future roles managerial and leadership roles in sport in the future. And even in terms of high performance, you know, the difference pre-COVID to preparing a professional sporting team to perform on the field changed overnight. And all of a sudden, the high performance experts and sports scientists had to manage through, 24 hours with athletes who were no longer in a centralized location. So now we've got remote analysis and management of professionals, and the use of data has accelerated, which brings its own challenges legally and otherwise in terms of rights and privacy and so on. So the sports lawyers are in really a golden age, or they're coming into it now, particularly those who are focused on data rights. So those are just a few of the other the issues that I see as being critical in the immediate and medium term. And perhaps the final one, of course, is where I spend most of my time, which is social justice. What this pandemic has done is brought people together in community and across international borders, and sport does that better than any. But throughout this, we've also discovered parts of the community who need more support, who were and are still being left behind. And sport is increasingly having to play a role in that field. Look, for instance, at the Black Lives Matter campaign in the US and the prominence of sports people. What that means is that the agents who are looking after those sports people are in a new reality. The general managers of those sporting competitions or the clubs that they are employed in are in a new reality. Sport has fundamentally changed. And I might just finally say, I have been delighted to work on the PlayForLives campaign with India as well. A very good friend of mine, Nandan Kamath, who is the CEO, I think, of a prominent sports law firm and runs the Go Sports Foundation in India, for whom I attended their annual sports law conference in Bangalore less than 2 years ago, and on the Zoom digitally their conference only a couple of months ago on the second occasion. Nandan started a Play for India campaign only 3 or 4 months ago, which has seen some really high-profile Indian athletes step forward and raise money and donate money for people within their sports who've lost their jobs to pay for necessaries and food and other things. So that's also been wonderful. And it's lovely to see those connections between countries like Australia and India only increase through sport, even in times of crisis and pandemic. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Craig. It was indeed inspirational listening to all the work that you've been doing. And as you said, as challenges come, it opens up new opportunities as well. And it's amazing to see how we quickly adapt in the sport industry, and I'm hoping for the best in the future. Our next speaker today is Mr. Peter Mackey. As we all know, the Study New South Wales has taken various initiatives to support international students in this new normal, be it with transition online or temporary crisis accommodation supports or reduced study loads and scholarships, etc. Mr. Peter, would you be able to give our viewers an insight about how you will continue to support international students and enhance their overall experience in studying in New South Wales?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ravi. And firstly, thank you very much to AISECS for this opportunity, and to Gurnam and yourself and the Consul General for your support. Really grateful for the opportunity. And Craig, great always to hear you speak. Just so lucky you're still young and fit, you can still play in the over 35s. I played this year with my club, but I may have played in an age group slightly higher, I'm not sure. But happy to say we won the comp, and we were very lucky in Division 3, very lucky to be able to have an actual competition. So, but on a more serious note, our heart goes out to all of those students here who are really doing it tough at the moment, and I guess more importantly, for those of your family back at home that you're thinking about and so concerned about, and for those students who may have gone home and couldn't make it back, as the Consul General said. So, but as the Consul General mentioned, we are working with the Commonwealth Government on a plan to try and reopen the borders, so hopefully that can happen before too long. But yeah, in the meantime, maybe Ravi, I'll start with just an update on the initiatives that Study New South Wales is undertaking. So with our crisis accommodation scheme, we're almost actually at capacity. We were able to fund 6,000 places. We've had about 5,500 applications. About 4,000 of those have been approved. that gap is not actually numbers that have been rejected. They're just duplicates in applications. And so we've just got to work out at the moment how much further we can keep applications open. What we have recently had is agreement from the government to extend that to the full 20 weeks. So we're trying to make sure that we can ensure that there are no students in this lead up to this difficult time before the end of the year that are left stranded. So we're doing what I can to try and make that money last as much as possible. And one thing that I would, and in a moment, if I have time, I'll put up and share my screen if I can, just to show people how to apply. One thing that I would do is ask if you, we do have a large lag between students that have been approved and the students actually making contact with the accommodation provider that they've been sent to. So I would encourage you to, any of your friends that have applied, to make sure that they apply, that they contact the service provider that they've been referred to as soon as possible. I know that often they have to extract themselves from their current accommodation arrangements, but that would be really, really a good thing to be able to do. The other area, of course, I mean, we've focused on the two most basic human rights, being shelter and food. We've successfully rolled out our 10,000 food packages, and we've just had approval for $1.2 million from the government to extend that for another 50,000 to 50 to 60,000 food packages, which we're rolling out with Food Bank at the moment. And unfortunately, business is booming. The students seem to be still in strong demand. So just want to make sure that's available. I will try and just share my screen now to see if, I think that's been disabled from the host. So I'll send around a presentation later on to make sure that you've got all of the information available to you. The other part to your question, Ravi, was in terms of just ensuring the student experience. Obviously, 99.9% of the things that we do have always been face-to-face, and we can't do that. So, but I'm pleased to say that we've been able to deliver all of our core programs. So the innovative campaign, the project that we've got going with Haymarket HQ, we've been able to do all of those remotely. And I guess we've just been trying to work with our partners to be able to deliver those sorts of programs and making sure students are at least getting some sort of skill base on how to present themselves remotely to prospective employers, because all of obviously the method of getting employment these days have changed dramatically, and it's hard enough doing that face to face as an international student, let alone doing it online. So we've tried to focus on those sorts of skill sets in a lot of that professional development work with our partners Outcome Life and others, and they've been really oversubscribed, those sessions, which has been good. So really, at the moment, it's about trying to make sure that students have got access to the right information. Craig talked before about exploitation. So we have also been able to fund our Redfern legal service to have an additional solicitor for the next 6 months, because again, unfortunately, their business is booming. And you may have read about some reports in the media through UTS on exploitation of students both in the accommodation space and in the workplace. So Study NSW co-funded those reports, and obviously it's important that we get that information out there and we uncover, you know, the sorts of things that are going on, as painful as some of those truths actually are. But so we do want to make sure, again, students know where they can go to get help. A lot of their institutions do have legal support, but students might feel uncomfortable speaking to you know, the legal support offered by their institution because, you know, they might feel you know, perhaps that they're conflicted. So it's really important that students can access that independent legal advice through their Redfern Legal Centre service. That's probably all I had to say, Ravi, at the moment, but I'm happy to take any questions that there might be.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. We will have an open question and answer round towards the end, but Rita's just messaged us on the chat box saying that you've been given the host rights to share screens if you'd like to do that right now.
Yeah, just trying to do that, but it's still saying host disabled participant screen sharing for some reason. But yeah.
Peter, do you want to try it now?
Try it now. Oh, there we go. Okay, so tell me if... Is that working now?
Just loading up. Yep.
Yep.
Excellent. I might just go back one slide. So, yeah, just reiterating again, this $20 million temporary accommodation scheme has been extended the full 20 weeks. It's open for applications at the moment. You can also get access to the International Student Legal Service and the My Legal Mate app, which is free. So we've made 50,000 downloads of that available at no cost. And if students want to get any information about the support services that they can access through the state government, we have a dedicated international student support line through Service New South Wales. So they just need to ring 13 77 88 and let them know that they're an international student, and they can give them directions as to where to go. In terms of the crisis accommodation, so the eligibility is there. Previously, at the beginning of the scheme, there was quite onerous steps students had to go through in terms of documentation. We've got rid of all of that just to make it as easy as possible for students. So they just need to explain that they have lost or at risk of losing access to secure ongoing accommodation and have no other avenues of support. They'll need that information that's on the screen there in order to apply. And they do need a letter of support from their education providers, but we have provided that template to all of the education providers in the state. And there's the information about the My Legal Mate and the free legal advice through the International Student Legal Service. So I'll send that through to you, Ravi and Gurnam, so you can distribute this with a fuller pack. But in the interest of time, I might leave it there and happy to take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It would be great if you could stop sharing screen so we go back. Yep, perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. I'm sure a lot of the international students listening to you out there have gotten so much, and they'll definitely reach out to Study New South Wales for more help and support. Our last and final speaker for today will be Mr. Gurnam Singh. Mr. Gurnam, it obviously isn't the first time today. AISECS have been constantly supporting and helping international students since the start of COVID, be it delivering groceries, financial aid, requesting for discount on telecom services, mental health webinars, and so much more. And Mr. Gurnam, I'm sure all our attendees are eager to find out about the launch of the 5 unique internship programs today, which will give them an opportunity to exhibit their knowledge and skills gained through their degree. On a personal note, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity AISECS has given me to join them as their sports and youth development intern. It's barely been a month since I started my internship, and I've gotten so many opportunities and new avenues to further my personal and professional skills to ensure I'm an asset to any organization. So, Mr. Gurnam, would you like to expand on this amazing platform that you're providing for international students?
Yes, thank you, Ravi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Honorable Consul General, for joining us today and for always extending your support. And thank you, Peter. I'm really honored you made it at the last minute. I know you was on holidays. And Craig, thank you so much for the opportunity and having a partnership, sharing with PlayForLives. Having you as a partner is maybe we will learn so much and grow together as a community. And I'm really pleased to introduce our remote internship program, which is not only for Australian or Indian student can do from anywhere across the globe. That internship is a 5 different sectors. We just started because I have personal experience, as Consul General has told me, that I came as an international student, and I know the difficulty I have faced during that time, but wasn't that difficulties. But now I think I have heard from international student, when I see someone messaging me on LinkedIn and say like, I'm from this side, I'm a student from this university, I need to work, I need to have a job or some type of experience, or maybe some type of internship program or something. So we as a team, me, Reed, and other team has discussed that what we should do, because these students is not their fault. It's just a pandemic happened and the world is everywhere, like there's a job is very, very less. So we trying to build that student for tomorrow to partnershiping with the PlayForLives and other association to make them as internship to start, and they will get the job in their own sector. As Ravi has mentioned, he's joined last 1 month, but he is a so brilliant student that any company can hire him like one go, because whenever we just had a talk or something, we can do this and that, he always available and always give his like 100%. So I just quickly run through as we don't have much time, like we have 5 internship program as of now, and we're going to add it more. So first we have a sports and youth development. Second is government and public relation. Third one is information and technology. Fourth is media and marketing. And the fifth one is leadership and entrepreneurship. So our main behind this internship to help the international student and make their career secure. And the reason I did the globally, because a student who's stuck in India and they are Australian students studying in different universities, so they also get the opportunity. And this internship program is more like remotely, so they have access from everywhere. They're sitting from the lounge room to a boat or somewhere in the uni. And other thing is, I think the holiday is going to start from 3 months. So I thought maybe give them opportunity to polish them and work with them and get the idea how we can actually make this world more better and more united.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Gurnam. Now we'll have an open question and answer segment where some of our international students will have the opportunity to ask questions directly to our panelists. Could I please ask Mihir to start off by introducing yourself and who the question's for?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to AISECS for the opportunity. I'm Mihir Upadhyay. I'm from Mumbai, India. So my question was partially answered by Mr. Foster already. But what I would like to say is I'm a sports management student here. I've done my bachelor's in sports management, and I would like to pursue my master's in sports management. Excuse me. Yeah. So I would like to pursue my master's in sports management in Australia. So given the current crisis, how difficult is it going to be for international students to pursue a career in sports in Australia?
Yes, thank you, Mihir. So, look, it's difficult to, we're not going to have a definitive answer to the question, obviously. However, what I would say from what I've seen is that it's all about adaptation. And so an adaptation brings immense amount of change. So the key, I think, is to try and get a clear concept as far as possible at the moment of what are the main changes that sport is having to go through and where's that likely to lead and what are the new areas in which expertise is going to be so very, very important. I left one out before. Digitisation is a very obvious one because of, the necessities that the pandemic has inflicted on all of us. But another one that's particularly important is human rights. And the reason that is because global sport is having to implement its own human rights policies increasingly. FIFA in 2017, Olympics have embedded human rights audit policy into their host city contracts for I think 2024 was for the 2024 games, and the Commonwealth Games is shortly to implement a really robust policy. So, and that's one area where I see that sports master's students in future are going to have to be well educated. The other one is in the issue that I only touched on briefly, but I think is incredibly important. Is the issue of social justice and social responsibility of sport. And this is an interesting field in India. I know from speaking to Nandan Kamath, my friend, around Play for India campaign, that, there's a different culture there in relation to volunteerism, for instance, than there is in Australia. And, and the sporting infrastructure is very different. There's very strong government influence, I understand, in the sporting bodies, and many of the former athletes who work in the field actually work in quasi-governmental organisations, which is very different to many of the main sporting nations around the world. So what you're seeing, perhaps not as much in India, but what you're seeing elsewhere is athletes all around the world now step forward and advocate really strongly for important social issues. And in fact, they're pushing sport into a completely new field. If you look through the history of athlete activism, you would see that sport has often tried to shut down athletes doing this. Even legends like Billie Jean King, who in the late 60s, early 70s, set up the women's tennis association, and at that time, was largely ostracised for doing so. She's simply talking about gender equality, something that today is seen as, just a normal part of social, political, business and sporting life. But the Black Lives Matter campaign is really a turning point. So, for instance, for those who see positions of leadership in any field in sport in future, the question is, what are you going to do when you're managing the NBA and LeBron James comes to a match that the whole world is watching and he's wearing Black Lives Matter on his T-shirt? Or he's got a slogan on there that says, "I can't breathe." Or he says, "Justice for George Floyd." Like, what are you going to do? So, 10 years ago, the question was never asked of sporting administrators. It simply wasn't on the agenda. Today, it should be the first question being asked. So whilst we've educated people very soundly in commercial principles and growing the business of sport, now the social aspect of sport is going to take prominence, particularly because the pandemic has made people around the world understand our interconnectivity and the power of sport to make change. We have some of these types of issues here in the past. For instance, we had the great Adam Goods, who's a teammate of mine in the mighty Waverley Old Boys 35s, who was, who ran into problems in Australian sport, in a really prominent sport, just by promoting his own cultural heritage. And if you were running that sport at that time, or if that happens next week, what is it that you're going to do? You've got Megan Rapinoe, who is the captain of the US women's national team, the most famous and decorated women's football team on the planet, national team anyway, who've won, I think, 4 World Cups and only won as recently as last year in France, who is advocating for LGBTI rights and racial equality daily, and not only off the field, on the field. And she was one of the first non-NFL athletes, and perhaps the first female, to take a knee after Colin Kaepernick did so, who's the famous NFL player, of course. So what are you going to do? You're running it. You're in control. And a sponsor says, look, I'm uncomfortable with this stuff around racial equality, and you've got LeBron James, your biggest athlete, one of the biggest in history of your competition, advocating for it. That's the question. It's going to be a really important field, and my advice to all sports management or master's students is make sure that you're really educated and very comfortable in that area by the time you go out into the vast sporting world.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And do you see, like, in the in future, do you see it to be a new normal, or will fans be back to the stadiums and the older rules will apply again in future, or is this going to be a new normal for us? So how will we operate then?
Some things have undoubtedly fundamentally changed. A bit like what's happening with workplace practice, in Peter's office, or in Consul General's office. All of a sudden, people are demanding the right to fulfil their work responsibilities in a different zone. They're saying, well, why do I need to be in the office all the time? So there's this new reassessment, which I think is incredibly positive, but long overdue, of what we used to call the work-life balance. Of course, there really was no balance in the last 15 or so years, right? So it was a misnomer. But now people are saying, hang on a minute, okay, we get, things can happen, that are unforeseen. There's parts of my life that I haven't been looking after well. This is giving me the opportunity to spend time with family and children, or look into other interests. And so perhaps I want to actually substantively rebalance things. I think the same is occurring in sport. So even if crowds come back into sport, you've still got all of the issues as a sports administrator. That is, how many, what are the caps, what are the guidelines, what are the governmental guidelines, what are the regulatory framework within which I need to work and which are changing on a weekly basis. How do I manage both of the teams? What happens with the broadcasters? What about child safety? All of these types of things. And irrespective, you might find that throughout this time, when people have spent less time in stadia, but the equal amount of time, perhaps more, consuming both the sport itself and all of the associated content, which is now accelerated exponentially, that becomes the new normal. And so this whole digital area of a sport has now crossed over from just fan engagement and commercial partner mechanisms. That's crossed over into the very digestion of the sport itself. That line has now, I think, been obliterated. And all of a sudden people are digesting the sport in a new way. And that brings risks and opportunities. Many sports are concerned, saying, well, perhaps people won't want to come back into the stadium because they're now comfortable doing this. Well, that may well be true. And if that's the case, well, good on them. They should be comfortable. That's the point. So therefore, how are you going to respond to that? What are the new commercial relationships? What are the new programs? What are the new ways to engage? How do you keep people connected? All those things have accelerated. I'll give you a quick example. So through, during the worst times of the pandemic, here in Australia alone, you saw many professional clubs utilising or asking their own athletes and staff to engage with with their fans, principally through digital media. And so the physiotherapist of an AFL club might have been holding, some type of online conference for young students, for example. And, so that, I think some of that is going to continue. Sport has been forced to find new ways to actually give value to people. It's okay, you feel strongly about us, we're very much aligned, but outside of just this 90 minutes of a football game, what do we actually mean to each other? And that's going to, out of that is going to spring a huge amount of, I think, immensely exciting opportunities. And that's where the smart young students are going to be focused.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mr. Craig. Would love to carry on these conversations, but just keeping time into consideration, could we have Deepali next to briefly introduce yourself and really quickly ask your question?
Hello, everyone. Warm greetings to all the dignitaries present on board today. My name is Deepali and I'm studying Master of Business with majors in Sports Management. I hope I'm audible enough. I'm sitting in the library at the moment. Looks good? Yeah, thank you so much. So my question is to Mr. Manish Gupta, sir. So you see, like most of the international students travel abroad for higher studies so that they can improve their interpersonal skills and get international exposure. But on account of the pandemic, the universities have changed their curriculum to online study, which has kind of disinterested the students, on account of heavy fees they have to pay in order to study on campus. So what steps should the government initiate to guide the universities such that the student get the best possible outcome out of it?
Thank you, Deepali. I think you have raised a very pertinent point, and in fact, this thing has come up, in my earlier interaction with the international students also. And the same concerns, because we must understand how the way the entire process works, because we all are adjusting to a very new reality, in which it's very difficult for any one of us sitting over here, to give you an ideal solution. But what matters is keep on feeding it into the system. Consistently, I've taken it up with the universities also here, as well as with the NSW education, as well as the federal government also. Because this is a genuine concern of the students, online education is not the same thing as face-to-face learning. So over a period of time, you would have seen some changes have already happened. Some universities have already gone into face-to-face, wherever it is possible. And that's what, it's already a discussion internally within the Australian government. Hopefully things will improve further for the better. We'll come to know soon, because already it seems you would have seen some of the reports in the media also, where they're trying to do a pilot with South Australia, especially for the students who are studying in Adelaide, to get a cohort of 300, and let's see how it works. All of these steps are in the direction, where you resume go back to the same old way of face-to-face learning, which can help you out. Some universities, I think they have extended you some concessions, in lieu of, because you have gone into online learning mode. And we'll continue to have this discussion with the universities. And hopefully things will further improve as we go forward.
Perfect. Thank you
Sounds
so
my
much.
query, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, can we have Chirag to briefly introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hi everyone. My name is, as you know, Chirag, and I'm from New Delhi, India, and I'm doing masters in IT from University of Sydney. So my question is for the Peter. Hi Peter. Actually, first of all, I must say thank you from all of my friends for this.
On back on mute, Chirag. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Okay, sorry. So first of all, I must say thank you, Peter, and NSW government for the that crisis accommodation. Most of my friends have benefited from this scheme. And actually, the issue is right now, like they have got the accommodation, but like some of them are facing difficulties in extending that accommodation from 12 to 20 weeks. So what is the procedure to extend this?
Yes, thank you for that, Chirag. So the process is pretty straightforward. There were a couple of the providers asking. So when they signed on, they committed to the full 20 weeks. So there'll be no problem with that. So all they need to do, one of the commitments that we have asked for both the student and the accommodation provider is that they have a plan for what will happen after the 20 weeks. So all they have to do is to validate with us that they have discussed that they have a plan, because what we don't want is for students to be, shown the door at the 20-week mark and have nowhere to go. So we want them to start thinking about that now. So provided they've had that discussion with the accommodation providers, they will be extended to the full 20 weeks. So there's no problem from our side. It's just simply a matter of the student and the accommodation provider confirming that they do need to continue. So what we're doing is making sure that the accommodation providers understand that when they signed onto the scheme, they committed to have students for the full 20 weeks, even if we only ended up stopping it after 12. So we will make sure that that the accommodation providers fulfill their commitment from their side. So it's just probably more an administrative process between the student and the accommodation provider in order to sign that off.
Yeah, there's a bit of confusion also, like some students are emailing to the government regarding the extension, and they are telling like go to the provider, and providers are telling you have to go to the government and they will confirm first.
Yeah, so we're making sure that the providers understand the process. So it's not up to the student to have to come to the state government. It's the accommodation providers are obliged to accommodate the students for the full 20 weeks, provided the student can demonstrate that they need that. And once we have that email from them confirming that that student is in need and that they have a plan post 20 weeks, that's an automatic extension. Yeah, we'll focus on making sure the accommodation providers understand that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much. Could we have Quisha, apologies if I pronounced that wrong, to briefly introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi everyone, my name is Quisha and I'm a recent graduate from the University of Sydney. I've completed my master's in commerce with majors in finance and big data. My question is to Gurnam as to, firstly, congratulations on the launch of AISECS internships, but I wanted to know more about how the internships would actually work and how long is the duration and what are some of the tasks that some of the students would be doing.
Thank you, Quisha, for your question. And it's pretty straightforward. The internship program has been launched. It's up on the website, and there's a very small form and very easy step. You have to just upload which university you are from and which country you're from. And you have to apply this internship till 30th of October because we already got like 40 students in 1 week. So we just want to limit it how many interns we can have to facilitate and educate them and to work with them and give them some type of sort of connect with the other different organizations. So, and work, I think everything is mentioned. I think I need to keep it short because we running out of time. So everything is mentioned on the website and everything you can see from there. And if you're having any trouble, there is a number and email. You can always do it to us, and everything, if you're uploading document or something having a problem, but we do have the structure. We will conduct the interview because we want to have the interns to provide them the provider like PlayForLives or few other the provider they have already contacted us. They need interns, so it's pretty straightforward, and I can run through with our social media platform that how easy it is to apply. And I also want to add that if you have in your university or anyone wants to be interns around anywhere, please do apply before 30th of October.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And lastly, we have Nitin. I've seen a lot of your fans dug out interviews with World Cricket fans. What's your question? Would you like to briefly introduce yourself and ask your question?
First of all, very good afternoon to everyone present here. I would quickly introduce myself. I'm Nitin. I have done my bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering back in India, but I'm pursuing my master's in sports management here at Deakin University, Victoria. So my question is to Mr. Craig Foster. Sir, apart from all the webinars I've attended since the past 8 months, the common advice that I've received from everyone is that networking is key to bagging a job here. So 70% of the jobs in today's sport industry are passed on by the word of mouth, or they're passed on to people you know or people who have the network. But people like me who do not have any previous experience in the sporting field, the 30%, they don't have any access to the network. So what suggestion would you give to students like us to make sure that we have an advantage over that 70%, and what should we concentrate on so that we can have an opportunity to bag a job in this field?
Okay, thanks, Nitin. I wasn't aware of that statistics that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But that being the case, okay, so you need to circumvent that and find some way to increase the likelihood that you're going to be in a prime position. So what I would suggest firstly is that has to be largely skill-based. So that means, what all the things that we've talked about prior, how do you provide a distinct competitive advantage for yourself? And that can be through, internships, that can be through the relationships, and that's why it's important that universities have relationships with a range of sporting organisations, if that's indeed, the field that you're studying, which you do. So, for instance, I can only speak about my experience, but at Torrens, they have relationships with a number of, AFL clubs and the Roosters, Sydney Roosters and the Giants and all these things. And so the whole point of, I think, where education has changed today, in my experience, is that it's very largely about, job preparation and job readiness. And therefore, it's critically important throughout that period to be spending time at least interacting and providing some expertise, providing some research, working on micro projects and these types of things with a large or targeted sporting organisations. Because what that does essentially is it puts you on the inside. It makes you, someone about which you've just explained to me. That is someone that's known to the organisation, that is a safe bet, that skills are demonstrable and demonstrated, and who can perhaps seamlessly fit in to an institutional culture. So that's important. So that's one reason why I think that's been a very important and valuable trend. I would say an organisation like this, AISECS, is also important. These types of partnerships where you can provide access into different sporting bodies around Australia, for example, become critically important, because what you're doing is you're essentially paying for education, but you then want to, both through the education and more broadly through these types of organisations, this is how you actually create your network. And so whilst they might work largely on an individual basis, actually what you're doing is you're utilising institutions to provide that for you. So therefore, it's critically important to make sure that by the end, well before, and this is where your research projects and these things have to be really well thought through, very targeted and done well. Because those research projects, as you'd be aware, that provides an opportunity for an organisational body to see your work, to see your work ethic, to see the the quality of what it is that you're capable of producing, and for you to also get comfortable with the way they work, with what the culture is, and with what the possibilities are.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks heaps. Well, that brings us to the end of this webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone for taking time to join us from around the world for this informative and productive meeting. A special thanks to Mr. Reed for taking care of all the technical stuff on the background and telecasting it on live on Facebook. But yeah, there were lots of amazing insights shared, new opportunities introduced, numerous questions answered, and I'm sure you all still have more questions. If you have any further questions, feel free to get in touch with us at AISECS, and we'll be more than happy to redirect you to the right support service. Once again, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our panelists, Mr. Manish Gupta, Mr. Craig Foster, Mr. Peter Mackey, and Mr. Gurnam Singh, and for your guidance and the support. And yeah, have a lovely afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us, and to all the attendees who've watched it today.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.